My name is Jeff Snyder. I'm the founder and chief inspiration officer of Inspira Marketing Group. We're a brand activation agency based in Connecticut with offices in New York and California. And today, I am introducing to your best friend at South by Southwest Festival. If we all know, long days and even longer nights. And to get through that here, I'm joined with Brooks Powell, from the founder and CEO of Cheers. Brooks, we've got a little samples here for folks who may have indulged too much last night.
Who here drinks alcohol? All right, who's the most passionate about alcohol? All right, right here in the back, his hand went up first. Do you drink it tonight, sir? All right, will somebody get this sample to him, or he can come grab it? Who's hungover right now? Okay. This is for them, and then that's like kind of like a Dayquil, NyQuil type setup. The purple one you take after drinking, but before going to bed, just 3 capsules. And our claim to fame is you'll wake up feeling like you had half as many drinks, or your money back. And then we started going to a lot of trade shows, and people would come up to us already hurting, and they would say, do you have anything for me right now? We'd be like, oh, well, no, you had to take this last night. That we realized there's quite a bit of market for immediate use case. And that's when we came out with the next morning aid.
Fantastic.
I have 2 more for when we get off the stage, we can give them.
Okay, that's great. So, Brooks, it was so interesting getting to know each other, prior to this call. And I'd like to say that you just had a straight line into founding this company. I mean, you went to Princeton, you studied entrepreneurship. Not quite the case. You actually were studying religious studies and were on the path to become a Baptist minister.
That's correct, yeah. So I was a high school swimmer, fastest swimmer in the state of Texas, had the opportunity to go to Princeton. Plan was for me to be a Baptist minister. So I was doing religious studies. And you may be wondering, how the heck does someone go from Baptist minister to the #1 hangover brand in the United States? Doesn't, really feel like it fits in. And I think there's 2 types of entrepreneurs. There's the entrepreneurs that are looking for a business, and when they find it, they start it. And then there's the type of entrepreneurs that have no sense of starting a business, but an idea comes across their table that they can't let go of, and they have no choice but to go start the thing.
So tell us a little bit about that journey, because it's, again, something that I don't even know how on your path that this even popped up on your radar.
Right. So Princeton, they want you to be a well-rounded individual, whatever that means. And they make you take classes outside of your major. And so they basically give you a list of classes from each department that you're allowed to take, and you're required to take a few of these. So I picked a neuroscience course, and the midterm was essentially write a 12-page paper on the drug of your choice, how it affects neurotransmitters, how it affects receptors, how it essentially screws up your brain, and how it works, right? So I picked alcohol. Professor actually pulled me aside and he said, Brooks, just so you know, neuroscientists don't really believe alcohol is a drug in the classic sense, because it doesn't affect a specific receptor. Basically, alcohol is a solvent. Your brain is this big fatty material. Solvents displace lipids. That's what causes drunkenness. That's what causes the dehydration, and that's what makes you feel bad the next day. So I said, okay, cool. Anyways, I get on Google Scholar, and basically starting in about 2010, there was an explosion of research into how alcohol affects the brain. And it basically turns out alcohol primarily affects the GABA receptor. And by affecting this GABA receptor, it has a whole cascading events from feeling good to disrupting sleep to making you feel bad the next day and withdrawing. Well, in 2012, there was an animal study that came out called dihydromycin as a novel anti-intoxication medication. And that's a mouthful. We'll just say DHM for short. DHM is the main ingredient in Cheers. And basically what this animal study showed is that if you took rats that were bred to be alcoholic, the control group, they would basically increase their alcohol consumption 5-fold from the original week. So by week 8, they were drinking 5 times more alcohol than they were the first week before they plateaued and just physically could not drink anymore alcohol.
Kind of like some people out in the crowd right now.
But if you put this dihydroamyrecetin in their alcohol, they would continue to drink at baseline levels of alcohol consumption and wouldn't start drinking more. So this dihydroamyrecetin ingredient was essentially allowing them still to get the pleasure from alcohol, but not need to increase the amount of alcohol that they were consuming to get the same level of high. They also then took the control group, put dihydroamyrecetin in the control group, and those rats came down to baseline levels of alcohol consumption. And then, kind of buried real deep in the study, they basically showed, oh yeah, rats given DHM didn't show any signs of hangovers. Now, you may be wondering how the heck, if you know an animal that's hungover, they basically put them through a rat maze, and a regular rat will go take a left turn, they'll go take a right turn, and when they come to a fork in a road, they'll make a decision and go with it. A hungover rat will take a left turn, take a right turn, it'll come to a fork in the road, and it'll just lay down. So a lot of rats didn't even finish the maze. And they also will sit with their paws real tight together. That's what a rat that feels good will sit. A hungover rat will spread its paws and hang its head, which feels way too accurate. And so, anyways, I brought this. Obviously, I immediately saw both the commercial and societal thing that this could do. And this was the early...
You broke your parents' heart.
So this is the early stages of an ingredient that was being studied. I wrote the 12-page paper on this, gave it to my professor. He got so excited about it, he scrapped a planned class lecture, lectured on this instead, and then asked if he could be involved in the business. And I hadn't even mentioned a business to him yet. So when you have an award-winning Princeton neuroscience professor saying, can I be involved in whatever you're doing, you know there's probably something exciting there. So basically brought the idea to a few other Princeton professors that were known to be quite entrepreneurial on campus with the idea of, I don't know if we can sell this in the United States. We don't know the safety profile. There's a whole lot of research that has to be done, but let's all go into business together. And basically spent the next 3 years figuring out safety, laws, supply chain, branding, raising money, so that I could go full-time on the business when I graduated in 2017.
Amazing, amazing. So why don't we go back there? Let's go back to the launch itself. So you said fundraising. Were you able to go out and raise a massive investment to launch this product?
Not really. What we basically found was, so our heart is in the right place, where animal studies were all showing that if you give animals dihydroamyrecetin, alcohol consumption actually decreases. Like, the animals have less likelihood of going into cyclical drinking and drinking far more alcohol. And then even logically, it seems counterintuitive, but if you actually make people feel better the day after drinking alcohol, you think alcohol consumption would increase, because it's like, you imagine people, if they're not worried about feeling bad the next day, they'll have a few extra cocktails at night. But if you know anyone who's ever a problem drinker, you realize that they'll often use alcohol the next day as a way to recover from the night before. Hair of the dog, Bloody Marys, what a lot of people are doing here today. I get it. So all the science basically shows reduce hangovers, do the world a big favor, both morally, socially, and just life is better if you feel better, right? We could not get venture capitalists to invest money because they're like, oh, we're trying to save the world. A hangover cure for college kids would look bad in our portfolio. And so we realized we were a sin stock, and it was really hard to raise institutional money because they were afraid of the optics of the whole situation. So we ended up raising from a Christian angel investor. So now you got like a Baptist minister founder and then Christians investing in the cap table. And that $200K was how we got the business going in 2017 once I graduated.
Fantastic. And then what you all are right now are talking to someone has actually gone swimming with the sharks. And this is just super, super cool. So tell us a little bit about that massive opportunity that that got you actually on Shark Tank. I think there's 75,000 people apply in a given year, and I think they take 200.
100.
100. Okay, even better.
So senior year at Princeton, I'd been building this business, trying to figure out laws, supply chains, all that. University knew that I was making this company with a few professors. Shark Tank calls the university and says, hey, are there any students that are building businesses? We'd like to, potentially have a student entrepreneur on Shark Tank. So I get a call on my cell phone, and it was kind of an awkward phone call like, Brooks, you're the only person we know building a business at Princeton. Shark Tank called. Do you want us to connect you? And there's only one answer to that. Yes. So that was basically, we started trying to get into Shark Tank while I was still a senior in school, and didn't actually end up filming until right after graduating. So actually came out on the set of Shark Tank wearing a cap and gown. But do you want me to tell the story of how we got? Yeah. So basically, we got kicked out of the Shark Tank process 2 times. So when they cast for Shark Tank, every year there's 70,000 companies that apply. Every season of Shark Tank is plus or minus a few episodes, 25 episodes, and there's always 4 companies per episode. So that's essentially 100 entrepreneurs that they'll put on the show. So they're trying to whittle this list down. So we're like on the short list. We're probably down to the last few thousand. And basically Disney comes out and they say, oh, we're a Christian company. We can't have anything that could be considered a hangover product on the show. And I said, well, that's great because I'm a Christian too. And I sent them a junior paper, a Christian theology of alcohol that I had written. So I sent this to the producers, and they basically said, okay, you're right. This probably is an ethical thing to do. Then we're like getting closer and closer and closer to the film date. They're still kicking people out of the process. I get a call on my phone, and the casting manager is real sad. And the casting manager becomes kind of like your lawyer and your friend through the process. Casting manager says, hey, Mark Cuban actually told our producers if they bring any supplements onto the show, he's just going to ruin the episode because he doesn't believe supplements have any science behind them. So, that really was a bummer. That call was at like 6 or 7 p.m. And I stayed up the entire night and I wrote a screenplay in the official LA screenplay font. If Mark Cuban says this, I'll say this. If Mark Cuban says this, I'll then say this. Dawn comes, I send it to the casting manager. Casting manager goes, okay, well, this is really weird. What do you want me to do with this? I was like, just forward it to the executive producer, the head honcho. She's like, okay. She forwards it, I assume. I get a call back a few weeks later, and she goes, hey, I guess the executive producer read it because I've been instructed to book you a flight to LA. So before you go in front of the sharks, they'll film all of Shark Tank in basically 2 sessions of 5 days. So the first day before they start filming, everyone gets to walk up and shake the executive producer's hand. So they're calling people up and they're shaking hands, and I finally get up there and he goes, Brooks, I've been casting for Shark Tank now for 9 seasons. And you're the first person to ever write me a screenplay of my own show. I think you and Mark Cuban are going to get in one hell of a fight, and we're going to have the cameras rolling, and let's make some show business.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, it didn't necessarily work out, and you and Mark did have some choice words with one another. But actually, when Brooks and I were just talking prior to jumping out here, he said that if he had to do it all over again, he would actually write a check today for $2 million to be back on Shark Tank. It has that much of an impact on an actual brand and sales. Pretty impressive.
Absolutely. If there's any Shark Tank people here, that offer stands.
So the one, being in sort of the experiential field marketing, brand activation side of the business, when I immediately got connected with you, I was like, oh my God, he probably built this business going out at the point of need. As people are exiting bars, college students, influencers, fraternity houses, people who are maybe going to the 8 a.m. classes. And when I look, and maybe you tell us a little bit about some of the consumer insight piece, that is absolutely the opposite of who your core customer is.
Yeah, so when we put this product on Amazon, organically, the customers that started purchasing this product were basically less than 4% of the customers were under the age of 25. So absolutely not a hangover cure for college kids. What we found was it was mostly millennials. So basically 2/3 of our customers were millennials and generally married with kids. So 80% married and kids, and 83% with a household income of over 100,000. And so if you actually go look at who's drinking all the alcohol in this country, basically as income goes up, alcohol consumption goes up. As education goes up, alcohol consumption goes up. And generally speaking, the more income you have and the more education you have, the more responsibilities you have and the more you care about your health. And yet people are drinking. So there's this irony of people who drink alcohol but also need to feel their best because they have important jobs. And that ended up being sort of our bread and butter customer. And what we realized is that the more we leaned into responsible and health-conscious drinking, the more sales went up. And a lot of people, we were very, I mean, even if you heard the beginning of my thing, we're a very science-focused brand. And so we would go to agencies, and agencies would try to dumb the brand down, make it super simple. They were always trying to make it simple. Oh, this is too complicated for consumers, too complicated for consumers. And we actually found that downplay the effects of the product, don't oversell the promise, lean into responsible and health-conscious drinking, make it more of a premium brand, and don't shy away from the science. And so we basically built out a creative team that's extremely good at explaining complicated scientific principles to consumers, and we leaned into that, and we're basically the first brand that has ever made a company work in this category. In fact, funny story, the founder of 5 Hour Energy actually had a product called Chasers Plus. Before he founded 5 Hour Energy, it was activated charcoal. Product didn't actually work, but you would figure a guy of that talent could have made this business work. It ended up being a big failure. He sold that business off and then did 5 Hour Energy, and now is worth a few $1 billion. So it's not an easy category to sell product in.
So you didn't do field marketing, you didn't do sampling, you didn't do influencer. Tell us from a marketing perspective then, for a DTC brand like this, where did you find sort of the most success? Where did you put your investment dollars?
90% paid social media. So, and by paid social media, I really just mean Facebook and Instagram. Instagram basically limits you to 90-second ads. All of our ads are 90 seconds, and we are trying to explain how dihydroamycin and cysteine work to reduce GABA rebound, which is what happens when alcohol leaves your blood system, and then you go into withdrawal, and that's what wakes you up out of sleep. And then acetaldehyde is basically what turns people red when you drink. It's the toxic byproduct that alcohol converts into, and is about 20 times more toxic than alcohol is itself. And cysteine will actually bind to acetaldehyde and form a non-toxic compound called MTCA. And so that's a mouthful, right?
Sure is.
We just use 90-second ads on Facebook, and currently we're spending $12,000 a day, and it's doing well. And the goal is to get to about $25,000 a day in meta spend. And once we get there, we think we'll have enough mid-funnel marketing to then layer on like 1-minute TV ads.
Great. And I guess, like all entrepreneurs, it's never a straight line. There's always some pretty big obstacles in the way. And you faced a big one with 14.5, yes?
Yeah, so if you're following this story, you just heard me say that 90% of our marketing budget is given to one company, Meta. And in 2021, and things were going really well. So like to give a sense, we cracked past the 10 million mark in 2020. Very capital efficient business. We had only raised $2 million. We were pumping out $2 million of earnings, basically 2 years after raising that initial venture capital in 2018. So 2020 is when we flipped profitable, 10 million revenue. Things were awesome. Growing at a nice clip, 25, 50% year over year. And then Apple decided to go to war with Facebook and launched iOS 14.5, which basically took off-app tracking. And it was like overnight, these extremely profitable ads that we were running died. And what basically happened in the direct-to-consumer and e-commerce brand world is brands that were doing really well, profitable, growing 25, 50% year over year, they basically completely plateaued and either flipped earning neutral or started hemorrhaging money. And then brands that were already kind of plateauing, so like Allbirds, Casper, a lot of these really big direct-to-consumer brands that were built on the back of Facebook, just started hemorrhaging money. And that was a really dark time. I mean, basically it was like we had our best year ever, and then the next year was like, we're losing money. So that's what iOS 14.5 did to digital advertising.
But I guess that was also, it was a wake-up call for sure, something that you really reacted to and were able to pivot. And that's where you made the decision to go more to the brick and mortar route.
Yeah, so we tried lots of other forms of advertising, and we just couldn't get anything to work. And
10 minutes, we're good.
We couldn't get anything else to work. So what we realized is that for, think about the Tylenols and the Advils and, pretty much any brand that has the power of lasting 100 years, they have wide-scale brick-and-mortar retail distribution. And so basically, after a year of banging our head against the wall on iOS 14.5, so 21 through 22, at the end of 22, we decided we're going to pursue brick-and-mortar retail distribution, try to get in grocery stores, drugstores, convenience stores, all of that.
Yeah, and let's, I think saying that you have a lean team is probably an understatement. That's no easy lift. So tell us about maybe some of the challenges that you were facing when you actually made the decision to go to that, because going direct to consumer versus now working with some of these larger chains and the sales process and such must have been a big challenge for you.
Yeah, so we basically restructured the business. I was kind of like the main Meta person with my wife. We ran all the Facebook and Instagram ads, basically gave that to someone else in our business. And then we basically became the VP of sales. And the reason we became the VP of sales is because we went out to hire someone who could have been a VP of sales, and they all wanted like $250,000 a year, and just not something you could afford as an emerging brand that's teetering on profitability because your main acquisition channel got cut off. So we just started attending trade shows in the brick and mortar industry and networked our way and started figuring it out. And thankfully what we found is that in brick and mortar, a lot of the suppliers talk to each other. And we basically found some really good advisors. And so we provided the energy, and the advisors provided the know-how. And we started picking up a lot of brick and mortar distribution pretty quickly. So now we're in Walgreens, Albertsons, Hy-Vee, Meijer, Wegmans, soon, hopefully H-E-B, knock on the wood. And then a whole lot of convenience stores. So we're in 5,000 stores currently, and by the end of this year, we'll be in 25,000 brick and mortar accounts.
Wow, that's amazing. Congratulations. With that, I guess, where do you see it? Are you hoping eventually to get to the phase of being in a Walmart and Target? Is that sort of the plan? Because to your point, this category really doesn't exist. And so I can imagine that every buyer that you're sitting in front of, it is sort of an educational process. They've got to take a little bit of a risk on you as well.
Yeah. If you think about emerging brands, and we would consider ourselves HBC, the health, beauty, care category. You can't just jump into a Costco. Like Costco is typically the last retailer that will bring you on. Highest risk, highest reward, and they're very conservative with the items they bring in, at least from an HBC national standpoint. Then there's places like Wegmans who they'll take a flyer on anybody. Like they're like, oh, what is it? Oh, Cheers. Okay. Yeah, we'd love to put it on our shelves. And that's what they love. So you can get in 100 Wegmans, and then if you perform well at the 100 Wegmans, you then, sort of take that data and you bring it to another regional grocer, and then it does well there. You take that data, and then you basically jump your way up. So you'll typically, for HBC, go grocery, drug, mass, Walmart, Target, and then finally you'll start landing those club accounts. But that whole journey, if you are really kicking butt, that whole journey takes like 5 years. If you're kind of kicking butt, it can take 10 to 15 years. So, yeah, it just takes a long time to put together a lot of distribution.
Well, it seems like you're committed and in it for the long haul. Given that you've had so much success, and I think you're a very just practical marketer in terms of being very logical in terms from an ROI perspective of what your ad spend would actually yield from a result, from a sales result perspective. Now that you're getting into retail, where do you see your marketing efforts going? I mean, I'm guessing that you're going to have to start thinking about alternative channels just outside of the paid social space.
Maybe. I mean, what we've basically, the marketing that ends up working for different brands is always different. I mean, some brands, we heard someone up here that was talking about their mushroom products, and they do really well with sampling. Our product, what we've found is that you have to have a paying customer. So if you give samples to somebody, maybe like 5% of them will come back and buy time and time again. If you make someone pay full price for the product, 30 to 40% of them will become lifelong customers. And so we have found that you really have to gate this. So you really got to get someone to say the science could work. I have a big enough problem, like need state, that I want this product, that your product solves, and then they get it. And we've really found the avenue for that is meta ads. And so what we're actually finding is that this math is going to be a little bit crude. For every $1,000 a day, or every $1,000 we spend per week on meta advertising, we see an additional cent per point of distribution in our brick and mortar business. But some of those accounts, if they put us like top shelf, like eye level, can be like 2 or 3 cents. And if they shove us in the bottom corner, it may only be like half a cent. And so what we're basically finding is that just go string together a ton of brick and mortar distribution and then pump the meta ads, and all of that ends up flowing through. You just pick, marketing is stickiness and distribution is surface area. And you need that surface area to recoup your marketing spend. Now, what we've found, and we saw this to be true with Shark Tank, is that if you can build a good enough mid to low funnel journey, when you then layer in your top of funnel stuff like TV. So Shark Tank is just one giant 10-minute long ad. You fill that funnel up, and then all of a sudden you just put the funnel on steroids. So we've had advisors tell us once you can get to about $25,000 a day in profitable meta spend, it's probably time to start layering on TV.
Okay, that's a great metric. So where do you go from here? Give us, where do you see this brand going in the next 10, 15 years?
I think the goal is trying to get the brand up to $100 million. I mean, I think that's where you've all of a sudden you've kind of like made it from a brand perception, standpoint. To do that, we just need lots of distribution and lots of customers. And so really it's the mantra at Cheers is go get more distribution, get it in more places in the store. Get the shelves, keep the shelves, grow on the shelves. And the way you grow on the shelves is you just keep pumping the marketing. You just take all the money that you made this year, put it back in the business, and you just keep growing it until we're one day got enough saturation that you can kind of, lower the marketing a little bit, but you retain all the customers.
And you have a full-time team of
10 people.
Okay, there you go. Amazing, isn't it? So thank you very much, Brooks. I think we've got maybe 1 minute left. Anybody has any questions for Brooks?
The problem with alcohol, 90% of the time, is the ethanol molecule itself. So good scotch, cheap tequila, none of these things really matter. I mean, like sugar content of drinks, like these things can affect your blood sugar. But at the end of the day, the problem with ethanol is the ethanol molecule itself. Timing of when you take the product that you got does matter. As close to your peak BAC as possible. So that's generally people's last drink. So that's why we say take 3 capsules after your last drink.
By that time, it's hard to remember to do that.
Responsible drinking.
Okay, there you go.
The smartest way to drink is not drink at all.
Right.
The second smartest way to drink is drink less alcohol and use cheers.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Brooks.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.